Welcome to the Future of Life Institute podcast. My name is Gus Ducker. On this episode, I talk with Connor Leahy. Connor is the CEO of Conjecture, which is an organization dedicated to scalable AI alignment. This episode is a lightning round. I ask Connor a lot of questions about a lot of different topics, and so you get to hear Connor's opinions about everything ranging from aliens to economics to memetics to education, everything. It's a super interesting episode. I hope you enjoy it. Here is Connor Leahy. Great. And we're back. Connor, welcome back.
Glad to be back.
I'm going to do something. I'm going to give you an impossible task, which is to answer complex questions quickly.
Oh, shit.
Yes. And I call this a semi-lightning round or a pseudo-lightning round because I want you to actually, actually explain your answer a bit. I don't want you to give me a 30-second answer, but take us. Let's see if we can move a little faster here and get your takes on a lot of different topics. You up for this?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, perfect. Are there aliens in the universe?
Depends on what you mean by universe.
the observable.
Sorry, I'm terrible at this. Damn it. In the observable universe, maybe, probably ish.
Yeah. Can you say anything about your thinking on this topic?
Look up grabby aliens. It's something I kind of defer my opinion there to like that one FHI, 20% of the universe is empty thing plus grabby alien kind of anthropic-ish models. I don't think about it too much. UFOs are definitely not aliens, though. So anyone who thinks those are aliens, obviously not. They're obviously our simulators messing with us.
Will humans ever upload our own minds?
I mean, if we survive the takeoff, yeah.
The AI takeoff, you mean?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so what motivates you to work on AI safety?
Is the world is nice. There's a lot of nice things. Things could be even nicer. There's a lot of people. I like them to be happy. I don't like suffering. I'd like to prevent suffering. It's another thing to do.
Do you find that your motivation is affected by your perhaps pessimism about the difficulty of the problem? Are you more motivated the harder the problem is, or is there could the problem be so hard that you would simply give up or be not motivated?
If a problem is impossible, it's not particularly motivating to work on. But as I said before, it's curious that we live in a timeline where we're not obviously lost. Where the odds are extremely against us. It's but we haven't lost yet. This is a thing actually that people ask me sometimes is that Connor, wow, you have these terrible pessimistic timelines, but you don't seem to be depressed, and I'm really not at all. I'm super happy all the time, lately in particular. Ever since I've really started really working on this problem, this is the happiest I've ever been in my life. And I'm it's I don't know, to be a bit poetic or whatever. It's some people are built for the valley, some people are built for the mountains, and I feel like I'm built for the mountains. Is I kind of my whole life. I feel like I've just been waiting for something to do. I'm just war's finally here. All right, let's go. I'm ready. Let's do this.
Do you think it has something to do with? Do you think it has something to do with the alignment of your values with your actions? So is that a fundamental of human happiness in your case?
I think it is. Yes. This is something that's always been even so I'm always tried to be a big brain rationalist, thinking about consequentialism and whatever. At heart, I've always been very virtue ethicist, and now I've come back around towards virtue ethics as such being actually good and consequentialism bad in many ways. And I have a deep aesthetic appreciation for heroism as a concept and honor and sacrifice, mercy. It's all very things that in our modern world kind of are almost trite, or they feel kind of cutesy, but I have a felt sense. There's a felt sense in my mind of honor and heroism as fundamental ontological concepts that are valuable and feel very good. This is it feels in a sense that my felt sense. I'm not ascribing any kind of moral reality to any of this, to be clear. This is just a felt aesthetic sense, of heroism as a fundamental concept of goodness and a fundamental thing that I and sacrifice. I know, very classic Western, very classic or even Christian or heroic aesthetics, but I I don't know. It's just always been how I've been. Like, as a kid, I was like, when I was like, I was like quite young. I would like, I had sleeping issues when I was a kid. I had terrible insomnia. It'd take me like 3 hours to fall asleep every single night. And it wasn't bad though. So as a kid, I was like, great, it's thinking time. I can just like sit alone. No one will bother me. I can just think of stories and like think about philosophy and science and just like do that. And then I would for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, I would just think about what does it mean to be a hero? And like that was like this like it's very funny because like for me it was like still like a fundamental concept. It was like a mystery I had to solve. It was like it was as real to me as physics. It was like something where it's like surely there's a true definition. I just haven't found it yet. Which is classic like pre postmodern philosophy kind of like thinking of like finding the true definition of goodness.
Doing the Socrates thing of examining a concept from all angles until you find the true definition, which it's in some sense a fool's errand, but perhaps you learn something in the process.
Exactly. So like I'm like obviously these are just like contingent concepts, and obviously it's just like my own like certain aesthetic sense. Like I don't ascribe like reality to any of these concepts or like universality to any of these ideas. But so I went through the phase of like as a kid being like taking these things super seriously. Then like an older teen, I was become edgy atheist, moral realist, not sorry like more relativist or like whatever. But then I kind of like came back around where I'm like, yeah, I'm not like saying these are like universally compelling or whatever, but they mean a lot to me, and so screw you, I can do whatever I want.
It's definitely more. It's easier to see how the virtues would apply to your daily life than it is to see how the moral theory of consequentialism would apply. It very often or very easily gets incredibly complex and meta with consequentialism, whereas virtue, thinking in terms of virtue, is something that you can apply more easily, I would think.
Virtue is the ethics for humans. Consequentialism is the ethics for gods.
Okay, on the topic of consequentialism, is infinity a problem there? So, is infinity a problem for the moral theory of consequentialism?
Yes, absolutely. Infinity is a problem for almost everything. Actually, I have stupid, spicy opinions about infinity and philosophy and how people are very, very confused about what infinity is. Especially that people don't understand that they're embedded creatures living in an embedded reality, and you can like very easily derive paradoxes from infinities, especially higher order infinities. I like begrudgingly accept, like the Aleph null infinity, but I'm jokingly, morally against higher order infinities because I think there's like all these kind of weird paradoxes that people like. Real numbers are obviously not real. Like anyone who says real numbers is real, you're on my naughty list. Like I'm gonna fight you.
Do you think there are actual kind of real world implications of thinking about infinity? Does it change anything about what we should do?
Yep, absolutely. I think people are very confused about many things. I, for example, expect that black holes are not infinitely dense, that this is just a confusion, just because we're confused about what infinity means and what, how time works and like analogs and stuff. And that if we had a more a different kind of theory, for example, based on like intuitionistic logic or like some other kind of like computable logic, then we would find that actually black holes have very different properties. I expect this to be the case for ethics and such. Like the classic example is, or like infinite ethics, where it's like, well, if you believe in like infinite multiverses or whatever, well, then you should assign zero value to this universe because it's a zero size slice of infinity. So therefore, you should have no interest whatsoever in anything that happens in this reality, and you should only care about affecting like hypercomputing multiverse or whatever. This is the kind of thing where if you encounter this kind of thought, your immediate reaction should be no. Like just say no. Just turn around. Just go back home. Like obviously this is insane. Like the funny thing about like alien gods from beyond reality, these like hyper intelligent, super Turing, machines from beyond reality that can come in through infinite mathematics, is they can all be defeated by simply saying no. You can defeat Roko's basilisk by just saying no, and then it's gone. That's it. That's all you needed to do.
You're thinking you can defeat all this very abstract philosophy and mathematics by simply trying to be heroic or insisting that you that you act virtuous.
You don't even need that. Just say, no, that sounds stupid. Just go home. Like, if like someone gives you some galaxy brain fucking Rocco's basilisk argument, oh, well, you see, now that you know about the basilisk, it will harm you. I'm like, no, I don't believe in the basilisk. And now the basilisk can't torture you because it has no causal influence over you because you don't believe in it. So, like, even by the basilisk standard of what it is, it doesn't work. You literally just have to say, nah, that sounds like bullshit. And then you're free. And like, I think there's a lot of like galaxy braining that happens in like infinite ethics in particular, where people say, like, well, assume we observed a hyper Turing machine. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. It's 3 steps back. You cannot observe a hyper Turing machine. It would take infinite steps to verify whether a system is a hyper Turing machine or not. Not just like arbitrary many, infinite. Humans can't do infinite steps. So any conclusion that follows in your later, 50,000 word essay, I can dismiss out of hand. I don't need to read it. It's already wrong. You already made a mistake. So you can reason about higher order things like this if you want, but people get confused about what they're actually reasoning about. They use symbols. So this is the classic, like, humans get confusing themselves with symbols. Is like, you have a symbol and we'll call this, infinite, steps or whatever, right? And you can like say things about this symbol. There's like all kinds of things you can do with this symbol. You can do all kinds of like algebras on this symbol and whatever. And that's all cute. But it's not infinity. You can't interact with infinity. Infinity is infinitely big. There is no thing you can't touch it. It's not something that will ever affect you. Anything that only affects you after infinite steps does not affect you because you will never exist for infinite steps. This is actually my criticism when I mentioned, a while back about ICE and like Lomonoff induction. So to quickly explain the point, the problem with ICE and like is like ICE is provably the most intelligent agent you can get. Is that it will always converge to the best solution possible, given up to a constant. So this is actually crazy. This is actually a crazy result. Like when you first read it, you're like, what? Like, this is wild. No matter what scenario you put this thing in, right? It will always get to the correct solution as fast as possible up to a constant. Wow, that's crazy. That's like, when I first read this result, I was like, wow, that's not what I expected. That's pretty impressive. But then you notice there's a fucking trick. Like, yeah, oh wait, I've been deceived. There is a trick here. That constant is arbitrarily large. It can be anything. That constant can be any number. It doesn't matter. It can be, Graham's numbers times the size of your universe. Like, it doesn't matter. It can be anything.
So it can't actually be implemented in our universe. Yeah.
I mean, it can't even implement it because you also need to have like halting oracles to implement this. But even if you could, it still wouldn't work. Like, I mean, well, the approximations wouldn't work. So if you try to, so basically, the cheesy way of saying it is, ICE can be arbitrarily wrong about arbitrary facts for arbitrarily long.
Yeah. Okay. If you could have a long conversation with anyone, who would you have this conversation with? Dead or alive?
Dead or alive? Ooh, that's a great question. Can I change their influence, or is this just gaining information?
I can't give you the physics of time travel here. It's
okay. So it's just extracting information.
Yeah, it's just extracting information.
I mean, assuming no one from the future, I mean, I guess it would. I've talked to most really smart people alive today, so maybe like von Neumann or Einstein, maybe someone like that. Well, actually, I mean, if I was munchkinning this, if I was min-maxing this, I would find someone who has a very relevant piece of historical information that I could like abuse to like exploit the market or something. But I would have to think more about that. I would probably be interested in talking to, maybe von Neumann or someone like that. Or I mean, if I wasn't trying to min-max, I was just curious, I would probably greatly enjoy talking to Leibniz. I think Leibniz is a very interesting character. I consider Leibniz to be the first alignment researcher. There's a great set of like book-length essays about like the history of computability and logic. forgot by who, unfortunately. And the first one, a lot of it is about Leibniz. So this is very funny. When Leibniz first put his doctoral thesis, he applied for doctoral thesis, and his application was that he would create the natural language of philosophy by which the will of God and everything could be formalized. So in the future, when two philosophers disagree, they need merely say, "Let us compute." You want to formalize all things into this one universal language, which is it is like this, like 1600s or like 1700s or whatever. I'm like, based, like, awesome, like, what a guy. Like, this guy just like inventing like the idea of formal logic and like the idea of like formalizing the will of God, into formal logic so it can be implemented on Earth. I'm like, man, yeah, this guy's the first alignment researcher. I love it.
Imagine being Leibniz back then, and then trying to differentiate between your ideas that are crazy and your ideas that are brilliant. And it must be
Yeah.
so difficult, because he also has published some far out views about ontology, for
Oh yeah.
example. But
Oh yeah, obviously. But it's like same thing like Newton. Like Newton considered his physics works to not be his greatest works. He thought like his like alchemical and his like biblical interpretation work to be like this is another thing about like epistemology where like people have very confused views about like how it was to be a pre-scientific person and like how different it actually was. And we have like movies like people go back in time where we see like historical people and they're like kind of like us, they don't know certain facts, but they're like they reason about things much more than we do. Like people don't understand that like people even like 100 years ago or whatever were fucking savages. Like compared to today, they were savage. They were awful. Like the violence and the abuse and the drunkenness. One of my I have to. This is completely irrelevant, but I have to do your listeners a favor here. If you want to look up something just to truly awaken you to like how weird history is, you have to look up the Leicester balloon riots. So this is one of my favorite little anecdotes of histostory. I stumbled on this by complete accident. So okay, balloon riots. Well, that's kind of weird, right? Like, okay, so I want you to imagine in your head what happened here. Okay, maybe there was some riot for some reason that involved balloons for some reason, or became like a symbol of balloons, something. Nope, wasn't that. All right, so okay, it's happened like 1800s or something. So like something like hot air balloons. Maybe someone was using them for some like bad purpose or something. No. It's much better than that. So what happened was, sure this is true. Look at it on Wikipedia. Um, was that some nobleman had built a hot air balloon and whatever, and so he was trying to go up into the air balloon and just like look at things. So a huge crowd of like spectators came to look at to watch, and what happened was is that a riot broke out. People got went insane basically, and like tore the balloon apart and burnt it. So like and like yeah, had to like run away, and so why? Okay, so I want you to imagine in your mind what could have caused this. The reasoning was, and I quote, that they had heard it wasn't the biggest balloon. They were just like, "What? Oh, this is the best balloon. Fuck this guy, kill him." Like that's actually what happened. Like people just like they were so drunk and just so fucked up that they're just like, "Get him, boys! Fuck this balloon." And apparently, this was such a big problem that during that time, it was a regular occurrence that people would try to hide when they had their balloon takeoffs to not attract too large of crowds because like shit like this would just keep fucking happening.
this was definitely not my guess. I would have guessed something that perhaps they saw the balloon as a god and were scared by it or
Yeah,
something.
yeah. No. They were just like they were just like some I think is like I can actually imagine what happened. Like after I thought about it for like when I first heard this, I'm like, this is absurd. How the fuck did this happen? But then I thought about it some more. And I remember when like, me and the boys were like young, when we were like 18 or 17, and we would get like really drunk. And then I'm like, oh, I can see how this happens. Like,
Actually, there's an interesting semi-serious theory about drunkenness, which is that so say before 1700 there were a lot of pubs in London and the UK in general, and people were drunk. People were after work, they went out and they drank a lot, and then they fell asleep, and then they never really achieved anything intellectually. But with the introduction of coffee houses, people had a different stimulant, or had a stimulant effect, as opposed to a kind of a downer effect from the alcohol, and then they began intellectualizing and talking and developing theories and so on. That's it. I don't know how seriously to take this, but the point is just to say drunkenness was a huge problem in the past, and I think you're right that it's we can't really understand how the world was back then.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like people were like, whenever you read a history book, you have to remember all of these people were just like piss drunk all the time. Like, everyone was drunk all the time.
Because
Like they,
you couldn't drink water, right? Water could be potentially poisonous, and so
yeah.
you
So
had to
beer was
drink beer.
but it was very common for just everyone to be drunk all the time, and illiterate and like violent and like I remember reading, I think it was in Better Angels of Our Nature, where he just like talked about how like in the medieval world, like everyone had a knife with them at all times. Like this was just because you need knives for all kinds of things. So people just stab each other at dinner all the time. Like people just get murdered at dinner all the time. And this is just normal. It's like, it's like, oh man, old Farmer Bob, stab Fred.
Yeah, as I mean, death would be much more common, and you would expect to encounter death from disease or from violence much more often than we do. We are absolutely shocked if we encounter death. But let's So, what will be the most impressive thing that GPT-4 will be able to do?
No, I'm using up all my trading alpha. No. I don't know what the most impressive thing will be, because I expect once people have it in their hands, they're gonna elicit more and more impressive things. I expect Riley Goodside is going to make it do some pretty amazing things pretty quickly. Um, One of the things I know it can do is that it's going to be able to write much more sophisticated software than like the current systems can do. Like ChatGPT is like great for like snippets and stuff, but it can't write whole programs. GPT-4 can write whole programs.
That is actually that could change things substantially.
Yep, it
Yeah.
will.
What do you think? How do you think the internet has affected our ability to think? Do you think it's been negative, positive? In which ways has it been negative and positive?
I think it is the average is positive, the mean is negative. So, well, actually, I'm not even sure if that's true. It might even be positive on the mean. So, like, again, people don't realize how savage the past was. It's like there's always been the question of like, has the internet made us dumber or made our stupidity more accessible? I think it's actually mostly the second. Well, I think on average, the internet has made people much smarter. It's made people more skeptical. It's made people more capable of like thinking, more exposed to different viewpoints and whatever. But what it has also made us is that it exposes us to super memes, to super infectious, like super dangerous memes. I think of like being exposed to the internet is kind of like being like a tropical disease researcher. You're probably going to have a really good immune system, but you also are exposed to like the worst things and like like hyper contagious, like dangerous things. So what I think this results on net is that society kind of stratifies more. We have more tails. We have more hyper rational people. Like I think the most rational people to ever live are currently alive. Like I like, even if you read like very rational people or like very smart people like Einstein or von Neumann, if you actually read the biographies carefully, they're like a bit savage, like by modern day standards still, and not just racism and stuff, but like also that. Like just like how more like, sophisticated we are in like many of these like regards. Like the average person of today, at least like thinks that rationality should be important or science should be important. Like back in the day, that was not always the case, and we have more cultural like memory of like these like important people that accomplished great things, who are very smart, who did great things, but like the average person, God. And I think now like the people who have truly been like forged in the fires of the memetic internet, are actually extremely competent in a lot of these things. Some of them, I think, most of it's like it's a selection process, right? Most people get caught, bottom half or bottom quarter gets caught into like QAnon or like whatever garbage. Then lower half gets caught into like Fox News versus CNN or whatever. You know 75th percentile gets caught into like sophisticated Twitter arguments or whatever. 99th percentile gets caught into like niche politics, whatever. First percentile actually is smart or whatever, or like actually is like extremely sophisticated and can like actually like be resistant to memes that would have killed a Victorian child.
If you think of differences between now and the past, one of the most extreme one is also the access to information. So this is kind of a this is a point that listeners and everyone has heard a million times, but it's still important to consider just how much information you're able to get access to in any given day. How much information we've gone through, how many just in this podcast right here, how many concepts we've mentioned that you wouldn't hear about if you lived, say, 200 years ago. Yeah. Okay. What is the most impressive scientific discovery relative to its time, relative to when it was discovered?
Ooh, that's a nice question. I like that. Honestly, I might go with Aristotelian logic. And so there's a lot of problems with Aristotelian logic and like Socratic and like all this kind of stuff. Like there is like so much of his argument from authority and like so much of it's kind of just like bullshit ontologies kind of pulled out of nowhere, whatever. But given the time, like, damn, like if you once you're like really aware of how savage the world was back then, and you read like Socrates or like Aristotle or like other people at that time, like I know it's such a meme to like the ancient Greeks, like it's such like oh of course, right? Such an Western like like a lot of people do fetishize ancient Greece and like make it look as like much more than it actually was. But I think actually appreciating that like inventing predicate or like first order logic kind of just out of nothing at that time is like actually amazing. I think in other worlds, like if Athens hadn't fallen and like had some more some other things had gone differently, I think the industrial revolution could have happened in Athens. Like I think they had steam engines.
Hmm.
Hero of Alexandria built a steam engine. Like it like or look at like the anti-Catharian mechanism and stuff like this. Like they were actually extremely advanced.
This is a mechanical computer that was found in a shipwreck.
Yep.
That looks like something from the 17th century, but is actually more than 2,000 years old. It's yeah.
It's insane. Like so like this is another thing that modern people don't have a conception of, but like the idea of losing technology or like going backwards is not something that we're familiar with in our modern world. Like we're only familiar with progress. But like in the ancient world, it was a very common idea that there were golden ages where the miracles were possible, and then those ages ended. And now miracles aren't possible anymore. This is a very common theme throughout history. And for example, after like the fall of Athens, I think there was there was such an age, and like also after the fall of Rome, there was ages where just a lot of technology got lost. Romans could build things that later civilizations could not build. Imagine living in that society. Imagine being like a medieval peasant and you saw like a Roman aqueduct. Like it looks like out of miracles, like out of like a fairy tale. Like no one can build stuff like this.
Perhaps the thinking about past golden eras weren't actually it was true in a sense back then.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think so. I think we've inherited a lot of that, and it's no longer true. Like we are currently in the greatest golden age to ever live, but back in the day, I think it was very reasonable. Like if you were a post-Roman, person, and you thought of the Roman age as a golden age, I'm like, yeah, I think that's actually quite reasonable. The same thing about like Athenians. So yeah, I would say probably Aristotelian logic or like just like actually not if I don't know if it counts. I don't know if this counts, but I would say like the general proto epistemology that came out around like Athens and Alexandria around that time. This like proto scientific. Like it was so close to like getting to where the Enlightenment got. I think. Like I think if this would have continued, they could have like discovered the scientific method. They were like so close.
A little bit more empiricism, a little bit more
Yes.
falsification, and they would have been there.
Yep. I think literally that plus just some more economic development, just like, more population growth and stuff like that. And, figuring out like, coal mining and stuff more efficiently. Like some more economics development, some more social development. Like there is still like, it makes sense that Athens fell. Like, Athens was also very small, actually. Like there were only like 20,000 Athenians plus like, slaves and so on. So like there actually weren't that many of them, and which again is actually then shocking that so few people had so many of these like critical insights that like or like is like very far advanced compared to like almost anywhere else in the world. There were other like Alexandria and stuff was also very advanced, but like compared to like the fucking like Germanics or whatever, like they were like still like barbarians. It's
Yeah, the innovation per capita in ancient Athens must perhaps the highest ever.
Yeah, and I think this is a great example of how the market is inefficient. is like you can just like most of computation, like most of the stuff Turing figured out, or like Leibniz or whatever, you can just figure out by thinking. Like like there's some things where like you need like so like one of the reasons why maybe industrial revolution could have happened in Athens, but may have been possible in the Roman Empire, is you need a certain amount of scale. You need a certain amount of industrial capacity. You need like relatively good like steel working and stuff like this to like build large boilers and stuff. You just like need steel processing that's like quite advanced, and like metallurgy. And like this is like the kind of stuff the Romans were quite good at, like Roman concrete, and like was like very like an incredibly good building material. They had like quite advanced metallurgy and stuff. Like this kind of stuff was like super important to actually get to the Industrial Revolution. It was not just coming up with thermodynamics. It was a lot of it. It was just like you know incremental improvements in metallurgy and like smithing and like the development of like building materials and stuff like that, which is like something that like Athens I think would have struggled with. They didn't have like very good steel. They couldn't develop like a lot of these things. Maybe they could have developed it later, but that would have required a lot more industry. So like if I had to pick like one other point where civilization could have gone industrial, it would have been probably the Roman Empire, not Athens. Um, but yeah, it shows how inefficient the market is in that you can come up with like most of modern mathematics with pen and paper. Like you don't actually need like advanced steel or advanced economics or whatever. Like you could like the fact that Aristotle exists is kind of an existence proof that, or like Euclid's maybe an even better example. Like you read Euclid's first fifth elements and whatever, and you read it and you're like, holy shit, this is modern mathematics. Like this is, it has axioms, it has like postulates, it like he derives like sure, it's like not perfect and whatever, but like holy shit, like this was so far advanced for its time.
And it remained cutting edge up until around 1700, which is an incredible achievement.
Yeah, so maybe Euclid's Elements is actually better than Aristotelian logic. Even maybe that would be my choice. Actually,
I like that choice. Okay, are books outdated?
I mean, yeah, it's. I mean, now at this point, it's cultural and aesthetic, which is like fine. Like I like books as artifacts. I think they're nice. I don't read books anymore as I have back issues now, so it's like sometimes hard to find a good pose to read in compared to just sitting in a nice office chair in front of my screen. But I mean, the concept of writing is definitely not outdated. The publishing that writing in books is a bit outdated.
Yeah. What's the replacement? Because if you replace your book reading with only podcasts or videos online, then you lose some depth. But if you go all the way to only reading papers, then perhaps it gets a bit. You will perhaps consume less information.
I sometimes joke that like there's like a hierarchy of like quality of literature and like nonfiction. The lowest of the low is like whatever your on posts on Facebook. That's like the bottom tier, and then you get up, and then you get like like a bit above that. It's like mainstream kind of garbage. It's like very low quality whatever stuff, and it's like a lot of like videos, clickbait stuff, and like whatnot. Then like one step above that, you have like like pop sci like books and like magazines and stuff, which is actually not that bad. There's some good stuff on there, but it's mostly still garbage. Then you get to like actual books, written by people who know what they're talking about, which has like real information in them and is usually accurate, but it's usually outdated and it's usually still like fluffy and like more like partially for entertainment and so on. And then you get to like higher level like papers, like that's where like actual scientific knowledge is really shared and where it's actually about the scientific knowledge. That's like where you need to be when you want to like really catch stuff. And then in the ascended tier above that is like poorly formatted WordPress blogs by one obsessive autist with an anime profile picture. That is the truly ascended form of the most high signal writing ever created by mankind. Gwern is the epitome of human literature as far as like nonfiction literature, as far as I'm concerned. And there's like a bunch of like these like niche Gwern-esque, blogs. Like some of them for like very different, like some for one topic, some for like all kinds of different topics, and many of them like absurdly well researched. And like I consider they're rare, and like most blogs are terrible. But like there's these like extremely niche tail end, like the tails of like blogs are much longer than like any other medium.
Yeah, I agree with that take. I once considered only reading books and not reading anything online in order to focus more. But I just couldn't take the loss of these in-depth blog posts where it's almost an insult to call it a blog. It's more like a research paper, but more self-aware and highly updated. And yeah, Gwern is highly recommended, definitely.
Absolutely. So yeah, I don't really read books anymore because I think the signal's too low. Like I think most books actually the signal, especially the signal to like words, is actually quite low in most books. Like I read tons of books when I was younger, but it was more to like catch up on like a common corpus because like the common corpus that like a lot of people expect people to know is in book form still. So like you should always like everyone should read The Selfish Gene and like a few books about history. You should read read the sequences, whatever. There's a bunch of stuff like that that like you should have read. But then after that, I mean, the current place where the most absolute galaxy brain, smartest, cutting edge stuff is posted is like mostly on blogs.
Do you think that language models could could replace books? Perhaps having a conversation with an expert is one of the best ways to learn, and perhaps language models could become so good that they could teach you better than, say, textbooks.
I mean, yeah, obviously. I mean, given that I think language models will lead to AGI sooner or later, then yeah, obviously.
Hmm. Have you done any of this? Have you? So how do you use these generative models in your daily life, if you do?
So funny thing is, I barely use them. I'm like
Okay.
the like there's this meme, this tweet where it's like tech enthusiast. Wow, my entire home is smart. I have everything connected to my Wi-Fi, and it's like tech worker. I have one printer at home, and I keep a loaded handgun next to it in case it makes a noise I don't recognize. Like I'm kind of like the second category,
But
where
is it actually a safety issue? That meme is about.
no, no.
Yeah.
It's. I mean, it's not just a safety issue. I mean, I am paranoid about like online safety and such to a large degree and such, but um, it is more just like I don't trust technology in many ways. Like I know its limits and its weaknesses. I am very interested in language models from like a research perspective. There's many interesting things to do with them, but like for most of the work I need to do, it's not particularly helpful. Like I hit the limits very quickly. Like I'm like I know what it can do, and I hit those limits super quickly. And there's also this is also why I have a good model of like what they can and can't do, and they can do a lot. I could probably optimize a lot if I put some effort into this. Um, but another one is actually safety. Is that the things I would want them to do are not things I want OpenAI reading my logs on. I don't want to share personally identifiable information or my personal emails or like whatever with OpenAI. I'm like, yikes! Like, I don't want them building, being able to train on my interactions with, people. I don't want them to be able to, if I had ways of improving their models or like hitting their limits, I wouldn't want them to know about that necessarily. So there's also limitations there. Um, there is a lot of useful things. Like I probably should just use more. Like there's a lot of like useful like transcription stuff that also Conjecture's been working on some transcription stuff, which has been super super useful. Really great tool if anyone wants to check it out. That we've been building there, and stuff like that. Sometimes use AI generation stuff for my D&D stories, like images, but I use surprisingly little AI in my day-to-day life.
One limit that I've come across when I talk to language models is just that it's you can't really go deep on a topic you know a lot about. But then you then you if I'm annoyed at Chat GPT's inability to talk about some philosophical issue that I'm interested in, then I have to remind myself that it could actually converse kind of uh, pretty well with me on any given topic to a certain level of depth. So it knows much more than I do about plumbing, theater, and so on. Any given topic. But I can see how you perhaps at this point it's difficult to make progress in your own knowledge if you're already knowledgeable on the topic.
Yeah, it's like most of the knowledge I'm interested in is on the level of like word and stuff.
Yeah.
If I was interested in something on like a pop sci level, then I'm sure ChatGPT is really helpful. I just like genuinely don't consume any pop sci. Like it's just like not useful to me. It's also not very entertaining to me anymore. I also have the privilege of being surrounded by very, very, very many smart people that I can just like talk to whenever I want. And so I expect if I would be more isolated, it would be more valuable. But like if I need to talk to an expert on like programming language theory, I can just get someone and just talk to them. So
How close are we to having personalized AI tutors for children, for example, based on language models? Are we already there?
I think you could have that. I expect children to be very, very good at immediately getting it to say bad words. It's definitely what I would have done. I expect this not to happen. Why do I expect this not to happen? Regulation. I think so. I'm one of those people. I think school is bad. Like obviously so. Like it's like obvious it's child torture. Like I consider school to be a massive human rights violation. Like absurdly so. And if like our descendants will look back at how we do school nowadays, and they'll be like, "You did what to your kids? You locked them in these rooms with all these other terrible kids and these like midwit teachers that were like often very abusive and like and no one did anything about that. What? Like, excuse me? So like I expect this to be one of the greatest moral atrocities of our not the greatest, but like this to be one of the most pervasive moral atrocities of our time that we torture our kids and we're just like fine with it. There's another great example of how humans don't really have morals. Like people are not inherently good or evil. Like they're just like they just go along with whatever society says. Like if school didn't exist and I introduced the concept to you, you would be horrified. You would never do this to your kids. You would be like, and the teachers do what? And how often is sexual abuse? What? I'm not leaving them alone with that, with these like in those scenarios. But because it's normal and everyone does it, like you get the fucking police called on you if you don't want to go to the torture chamber with all the other kids to get tortured. You know, like
This is interesting since if you ask, I think a lot of people they would say that kind of education is something that everyone can agree is a good thing, like family or something like this. But
well, yeah,
perhaps we should differentiate between education and then the school system as it looks now.
Exactly. So this is the classic phenomena of where so this is like the like classic Robin Hanson, Elephant in the Brain, another book everyone should read, concept where something, on surface optimizes for X. Everyone says it's for X, but in practice it obviously is optimizing for Y. So like maybe there's a different purpose. And the actual purpose of school is it is child prison. It's the parents need to go to work. They need to do other things. They can't take care of the child. They don't want to spend that much time with the child. They have to like be put away in the child prison. And also you have to civilize people. Children are feral. Like, children are animals, like obviously. And like, cute, adorable, lovely animals. And, I love kids. But like they are animals. And like if you want them to integrate into society, at some point there has to be a civilizing process. So the way this should work is, you have loving parents, paying close attention to them, stern but loving father, kind but loving mother, whatever. But at an industrial scale, you can't always guarantee that. So, especially if you need people and workers to be at a certain kind of educational level, you can't guarantee that parents will necessarily do that. It's in the modern world, you need to learn to read, you need to learn to, do simple mathematics and whatever. And so, and most people do not want to learn mathematics. They really, really, really don't. And you have to force them. Like you have to literally use violence to teach people math. Like some people, that's not the case. Like, I think if you left me as a kid just unsupervised in a room, I would have like, just like stumbled up on mathematics just because I was bored and I thought it was fun. It was like a puzzle. Like, you left me there with like a textbook and I would have probably just like, done it because I was bored. But for most kids, that is not the case. And if you want kids to function in modern society, if you want them to live a fulfilling life and, be able to handle themselves, you need to literally use violence, like at scale. Again, this is if you're a dumb society. If you're a smart society, do I have ways to solve this? I have lots of ways how we could solve this, but it requires an actual smart society, which we do not have.
To have a more humane schooling system
Oh
where,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
There's so many ways how we can make school this wonderful experience that like everyone backing out that helps people grow as people, become adults, like, lots of like fun experiences where, you're challenged, you get to like there's like, yeah, of course. Like
does this have to do with society simply becoming richer and then thereby having resources to become more humane, become more perhaps personalized in our approach to education, not putting every young person in the same box?
Yeah,
which were perhaps necessary in some sense when the kind of modern school systems were set up 200, 150 years ago.
absolutely. Like a lot of that, like school is much better now than it was before. Obviously,
Yeah.
like as much as I, am being direct here that school is torture, and I do consider it torture, and like it is like obviously so. It's like so much better than it used to be. Like obviously, like especially at least in wish like a lot of people do have fond memories from school. I have some fond memories from school, even so I consider it mostly torture. You know, still there's a lot of nice things. Some of my teachers were really nice and they taught me some great things, and I'm happy that I got to spend time with them. And I had some good friends. There's also a lot of really traumatic experiences, as every kid has during those times. And it's cruel gaslighting. This is like why I'm like passionate about this. It's like very cruel gaslighting that like, kids are put into these terrible situations where they're like being bullied, or like the teachers are cruel or abusive, and they're like, they're maybe they're a bit ADHD and they just like can't pay attention, and they're like forced to sit still, and like this is like genuinely painful. Like as a kid with ADHD, like this was like genuinely just like very very terrible, and I got lots of shit for that, and I only got away with it because I was like pretty smart. But like if I was not been smart and I would have like failed in school, this would have been like absolutely traumatic. This would have been horrible. So it was like, I did get into trouble a lot because I would just not pay attention. I'd be like, wiggling and like, talking and such. But I got lucky. And but it's still better. Like, right? Like, no one hit me, in school. I was never abused. I was never hurt. Like, I was yelled at, sometimes, but like, no one ever hurt me. That was not the case a while ago. If I was born like 30, 50 years ago, yeah, teachers would have beaten the shit out of me. Like, obviously so. Maybe rightfully, but, um, no, I'm joking, obviously. Yeah. But the problem is, I think, is it's not just money. It's also money. It's also money and stuff. But it's like, ah, cynicism. Man, I'm so cynical today. It's just so sad. But like, the core problem is much worse than that. Like that, one of the core problems of civilization, of humanity, that comes up again and again in different guises, is this problem that like just most people aren't that great. Like, man, like just like most adults are just like, they also have their shit. They're also kind of immature. They're like, they don't give good advice, and they're like, they can get angry and like whatever. And like as a kid, you're in a particularly vulnerable state. It's actually basically the same relationship, like the same type of relationship that exists between like a patient and a therapist. So there's this current movement kind of going on where like everyone should go to therapy. Everyone should have a therapist. I'm like, whoa, slow the fuck down there. I'm not sure that's a good idea. Um, I think the idea of therapy is great. The idea of having someone guide you through emotional issues, help you grow as a person, someone to talk to, like, oh, wonderful, yeah, fantastic. Now let's look under the rug and see how this actually works. Oh no. And like school is the same kind of issue where like, oh, education, you're teaching kids how to be adults and how to do useful things. Wow, this is so wonderful. Let's look how, oh no. So I consider these the same class of problems where like if you have a great therapist who's intelligent and mature and they care and they're like, yeah, like, wow, that's such a high value experience. Same thing with the teacher. If you have a great teacher, smart, kind, patient, and really believes in you and is helping you, that's a wonderful experience. That's like as a kid, having a mentor, having some adults that are really looking out for you, they're rooting for you, is so important. Both your teachers and your parents and so on, you really have your parents and they're behind you. They're rooting for you. That's so important as a kid. It's so valuable. But you just can't guarantee that at scale, man. Most teachers are just dudes, they're just like some kind of people. They're just like, they don't want to be here either. They don't even like kids. Like, fuck.
What is a belief or an opinion you have that is very different from those of your in group?
Well, depends on how in the in group is. I have various spicy opinions about like, you know, coordination, politics, and what we already mentioned some of this. If I guess if you define my in group as like not like literally my friends, but like wider cultural context, probably my like belief in like like virtue and like these kind of concepts, or more like Well, here's a fun answer. Let me give you. Okay, instead of giving you a serious answer, how about I give you a fun answer instead? Okay, fun answer is whole schizo theory about basically how like all of like um religion, mythology, spirituality, and stuff are like actually really important and like completely mechanistically understandable. Like I think that like um if you replace the word spiritual with like virtual, if you replace like magic with or like spells with memes, it just works. You have a congrats, you have a mechanistic understanding of magic. So like I think that there are that like concept of magic is very real, and like magic with a K kind of is like very real and like actually a very meaningful concept, but it's just it's very confused. Like people are confused about it. They think it's like a physical concept. It's not. Like magic is to reality as computation is to CPUs, or like computer programs are to CPUs. So like one of my favorite examples of this is that there are there's many groups like that and especially Southeast Asia, which have a myth about the evil eye. So the way this works is the shaman can put, or the sorcerer or whatever, can put in a certain type of curse called an evil eye on a person, and then they will like wither and die if they get the evil eye. So this is true. This is observable. Is that people who get the evil eye grow like sick and they often die. This is real. This is observable, empirically observable phenomena. Now, how do you explain this? Well, if you try to explain this with like, a purely, like physicalist driven, like just like view, you're like, that doesn't make any sense. This can't be possible. Like, surely there's like some mistake here. Well, no, I think there's another aspect. If you look at this medically, there's a very simple explanation for this. The explanation is very simple. When the shaman casts the evil eye, they make it common knowledge that the evil eye is on this person. The tribe now all know, oh shit, this guy's got the evil eye on him. Fuck, I don't want to talk to him. So he just gets neglected. That's it. Everyone, it's a software attack. The shaman performed a software attack on the operating system running on the general memetic environment. They introduced a meme into the environment, a toxic meme, which was directed against a specific person, which changed predictably so, changed the minds of the other people to start neglecting this person. And by neglect, people die and people get sick.
But this reinterpretation of magic in terms of memes and signaling and social psychology is still perfectly compatible with a physicalist worldview.
Yes.
It's just a slightly weird way of thinking about it.
Yes, exactly. It's I was naive physicalist would have been the correct way to say that. It's like I think magic is as real as a Python program on your computer. It's like, what does the program exist? Debatable. Like you can say it's encoded in physical states, of course, and it has physical consequences on reality. And to be clear, none of this is like unique to me. Like these are obviously things that other people have noticed as well. Like even like all the way back to like structure and interpretation of computer programs opens with this like nice chapter, like nice little intro where he's like, oh, we have sorcerers encoding arcane glyphs onto magic stones that summons immaterial spirits that can have effects on reality, and that's what we call a computer program, or programming on a CPU, a computer program, So I sometimes talk about I've mentioned this before, like the idea of like the missing science of memetics. I think the missing science of memetics is also the missing science of magic. And so, like, when I say memetics, I mean like a science that can predict how memes would be effective in a given environment. Like, we should have an ontology, a way of thinking about how do we cast spells. Like, how can we like? It's a bit of a dark one, but I have a really good example for this. This is a bit dark, but so there is a truly terrible thing that has that happened a lot in over the last 10, 20 years, which is school shootings. This is a truly, truly tragic thing. This is a terrible thing. No one wants this to happen. Everyone wants to prevent this. But somehow they keep happening. Somehow this keeps happening, especially in the US. Well, what causes this? Well, one obvious explanation is guns. That's a pretty reasonable theory. But then we look at like Canada or like Switzerland or whatever, and they have as many guns as Americans, sometimes more, and they don't have this problem. Or it's like much, 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 much rarer, like orders of magnitude. And I'm like, okay, so maybe it's definitely contributing to the problem, but like, is it the problem? Well, not really. Well, having more guns obviously also doesn't solve it. Like, I don't think I need to prove that. Like, obviously it doesn't help. So, not that. What is it? Why does it happen in America but not in Switzerland? That's kind of weird. So, there's a lot of weird explanations for you can have for this. You can economic disparity or like mental health treatment or whatever. But I think there's a much more sobering reality, is it's memes. It's cool to do. It's just because of the way the media treats school shooters in the US, it has become the default script, the fate, the encoded in our cultural mythology as a school shooter as this like evil boogeyman. And like this is the thing that evil people do. This is the if you tread off the path of light into the path of pure darkness, this is what happens. So what has happened is that a deviously toxic meme has embedded itself into the cultural reality of especially the United States and the Anglo-Saxon world, and the like English-speaking world in general. Like these things don't really happen like in Asia. They're like much, much, much rarer there because it's a different cultural context. It's a different spiritual realm, so to speak. So, what do you do? So, okay, what is my solution? How do we stop school shootings? The truth is, we have to make it uncool. What I think what actually has to be done is you need to have a anti-meme. You have to like release memes. You have to change the spiritual story around this about evil and good and so on to make it not the thing that evil people want to do. You have to give them something else to do because there will always be evil people. There will always be people who feel betrayed, who want to like take vengeance upon society or whatever. And basically, you have to cast a spell. You have to manipulate them into thinking that they should do something different. And I have no idea how the hell to do this. Like, holy shit! Like, if I was a advanced civilization with an advanced science of memetics, I should be able to solve this. Like an alien comes from space, looks at it, it's like, yes, this is a class 2AB memetic hazard. I know what to do. Let's activate protocol D. And then they'd like do something and like say some words and things would be solved.
Do you think that we could actually get a science of memetics going? Because the sciences that have been very successful are sciences that are not that are studying something where humans do not interact with the object. Physics, chemistry, biology to some extent. But the perhaps one reason why sociology and economics aren't as successful is because you're studying something where humans are interacting with the system. And with memetics, what you're studying is purely humans interacting with each other. And so, wouldn't it be too fast moving and fragile and complex for us to pin down, say, Newtonian laws of memetics?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There would not be Newtonian laws for this. This is a level 2 science. Like I think humans have like mastered level 1 science pretty well. Like look up how like an EUV lithography machine works. Like what the fuck? How the hell did humans build that? So the fact that we can build that, I'm like, okay, yeah, we understand like level 1 like physical science. Cool. If you look at the things that are actually hard for modern science, like the things we actually just like cannot do, you always get back to complexity and interactivity. You get back to hard algorithmic problems, biology, sociology, economics, all these kind of things. Like, what do these things have in common? Well, multiple things. One thing is reactivity and like chaos, and how by interacting, like level 2 chaos, in the sense that you interacting with the system makes it chaotic. So this is the interesting version of the efficient market hypothesis. The interesting version is that it is a system which is chaotic by you interacting. If it is not chaotic, you interacting with it will make it chaotic from your perspective. This is a very interesting property to have. This is like an adversarial property. The market is adversarial. This is also interesting from the perspective of AI. This is why AI and AGI is fundamentally different from other kinds of like disaster or like, risk management, because you're dealing with an adversarial system. When you're dealing with like volcanoes or like, viruses or whatever, like viruses are kind of like an intermediate state. Let's say volcanoes. They're not malicious. Like the volcanoes aren't maximizing their damage to cause to human. They're not like it's not like once you learn where the volcano is, the volcano goes somewhere else to hide from you, right? It's just like, the level 1 problem. It's like, okay, there's a physical phenomena out there in reality. It might be complicated. It might be, we might need to develop some new theory or whatever, or some new measuring devices. But like, humans are actually pretty decent at that. Not great, but really pretty decent at this. Level 2 problems are different. Level 2 problems are things that evolve, that react, that fight. And this is to a large degree like exactly why these sciences are hard. Like sociology is harder than physics, obviously. Like physics studies, like physics is a science of the first order Taylor derivative expansion, right? And sociology is much, much more complicated. This is why sociology is terrible. Like if you read an average sociology, like paper, terrible, 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 terrible. Like no signal. And and I think the reason is not necessarily lack of trying. It's just that this is really, really hard. and it requires the development of like science 2, like scientific method 2.0, to be able to like deal with these kinds of scenarios. I think we've seen some early developments towards like scientific method 2.0. And we have some methodologies that are like much more advanced than like anything like Popper or such would think about. Like Popper is like classic like science 1.0 kind of stuff, while like modern conceptions of science are much more complicated and involve other ways of gaining information about reality and such. But as an existence proof about how I think this is hard, well, not impossible, consider that the shaman can cast the evil eye. How did he do that? Well, he understood, he had a model, a causal model of how things around him work, and how if he says certain spells and he like frantically waves his hands or whatever, that he can then accomplish a intervention in reality. There's an intervention, the evil eye, that maybe it's passed down from shaman to shaman, but like someone figured out that they could do this and that it worked, and then they kept it around. So it's if that like proto scientific view can already understand quite a lot of these things, like actually humans very naturally have a lot of sense for these kinds of things, like how to be convincing, how to be, like an in tuned sense for social reality. And if anything, for most people, social reality is more natural than actual reality. Like actual reality is actually quite unnatural for most people. Most people don't really interact with physical reality. They interact through social reality. And most people, the fundamental ontology that most people think in is not atoms and bits and whatever. It's like people and alliances and friends and family and stuff like that, which are fundamentally high level concepts. So I think we're at the stage of like there's lots of low hanging fruit. It's very hard. If I had like tons of time, and AGI wasn't around the corner, maybe I would work on the science of memetics, as seems my brain, takes a liking to these kinds of thoughts. So maybe I'd be working on that. A formal theory of magic.
We have a better intuitive grasp of social dynamics than we do about physics, for example. But
Yeah.
why is our scientific theories of physics then more advanced than our scientific theories of memetics? If we start out with if we start with a better starting point in the social realm, why can't we make faster progress there?
Because physics is just easier, like much easier, and it's not adversarial. So this is like the memetic evolution thing. So like if I was sent back 2,000 years, whatever, and I spoke the language, I could like memetically destroy these people. Like I could make them laugh. I could make them, believe anything I say. I could out argue Socrates easily. If Socrates came up to me, I would destroy him. Not because I'm smarter than him. Socrates was probably much smarter than me, but because I have been like, I've heard all his arguments. I am so memetically, I grew up on, fucking the internet. Like I have debated and argued. Like, man, I would destroy Socrates. He would be like he would just rage quit if he had to debate me. Like, and not just me, to be clear. There's like lots of people that like, in modern reality, like most like high school debaters, I think, could destroy Socrates. So it's an evolution. The problem gets harder as you interact with it.
If you were to choose one person or group in history that has helped humanity the most by your values, what person or group would you choose?
Question. Not sure I can like pick out anyone in particular. Like thinking about counterfactual impact. What would be the highest counterfactual impact? Like there's lots of people who did great things, like creating vaccines or like developing like various branches of science. But a lot of them I think are not counterfactually that important. Like I think a lot of these sciences would have been developed anyways. If Turing hadn't existed, I think like Konrad Zuse would have like invented things. If Einstein hadn't existed, then Lorentz, I think it was, would have like invented special relativity.
So what we're thinking about is perhaps a bit like the question about Aristotle or Euclid,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
we
I
think
think
about who made the earliest progress on a difficult problem, but in the ethical realm.
yeah. So I mean, yeah, like someone who was ahead of his time was Jeremy Bentham, but I'm not sure how big his influence was. Like I don't know if he would be like the person who's made the most differentiable impact. I mean, you could also give the like meme answers of like Stanislav Petrov and stuff, like the people who averted nuclear war. I expect whoever actually did the most good is someone that history has forgotten. Just like some person in some scenario just who made a choice that really made the world a better place and we're never celebrated from it. But I don't have a clever answer for this one.
Okay, perfect. Is AI generated content the future of media?
Obviously. Like I've gone on the record to say in the past that I expect you can generate full like Hollywood movies in like the next couple of years. I expect that to be possible.
Full Hollywood movies in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
That would surprise me, but yeah, I've been surprised many times. So perhaps I haven't updated all the way as you mentioned before.
Yeah, just update all the way, bro.
All right, perfect. Let's end it there then. This has been fantastically interesting to me, Connor. I hope it's been interesting to you too.
Yeah, had a great time. Thanks so much for having me.
Perfect.